Welcome to Under the Fig Tree podcast. In today's episode, hosts Reverend Micah Glenn and Reverend Dr. Ben Haupt talk theology and life as they meditate under the fig tree.
What's up? Welcome back to another episode of Under the Fig Tree podcast. I am your host, Reverend Micah Glenn, Director of Recruitment here at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis, as always joined by my co-host, Reverend Dr. Benjamin Haupt. How are you, brother?
That's me. I'm well. I'm all right. Yeah. It's a nice day outside, and I'm enjoying life.
It's not anytime soon, so we have episodes between now and then, but you have a sabbatical coming up.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, as I was doing your introduction just now, as we were opening the podcast, I wanted to say your middle name. I imagined it's something like Michael or Henry, but I couldn't think.
Starts with a D.
Is it David?
No.
Well, anyway.
It's a good name.
All right. Well, David is a great name.
Yeah.
Before you go on your sabbatical, one of these introductions will include your middle name, just to add a little more spice and a little more flavor to the introduction. I try to do it a little different every time.
Well, I'll just leave you guessing for.
Is it
for
Derek? Anyway.
No.
All right. Well, we're joined by.
No offense to the Dereks out there, but that's not my middle name. You'll have to keep guessing.
Yeah, it's all right. I'll randomly throw out names with D as the podcast goes on. But we are joined by a guest. I was going to say seminarian, but that's already coming past.
Yeah, I'm still a seminarian, just a graduate student seminarian.
There we go.
You've just been a seminarian for so long.
just can't get over living here.
It's not vicar anymore. It's still not pastor. It's still just seminarian Jacob Rhodes.
Advanced seminarian Jacob Rhodes. How are you doing today, bro?
I'm doing good. It's nice to be down here and not be in the library for a little break.
There you go. Yep.
Is that one of your jobs on campus?
No, I only have 4. They've asked me to work there and do like the German and Latin stuff, but I thought 4 jobs on campus was enough. But
typically, yeah. But you work grounds crew, which when I was a student is the best job because it gets you outside, which is rare when you're in grad school.
Out of your head.
Yeah, out of my head. It's really easy to go mow the field for 2 hours and just completely detach from I just read 400 pages of what I'm reading right now of Johann Gerhard. Great. Sure. Time for me to go mow the field.
Yeah, if you ever see a guy on a lawnmower here with a cowboy hat on and cowboy
and a clerical
boots,
sometimes
too, and maybe clerical, it's
cut off shorts.
Jake Rhodes.
That was only for one day.
Got it.
Sorry about those images, viewers.
But it's good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the show.
Great to have you on. So, Jake has been one of our student workers in enrollment for
couple of years now.
A couple of years, yeah. It helps us with campus tours and showing students around, taking them to lunch, dinner when we need.
Right. I think you are you're the guy that oftentimes takes students out to eat. So we pay you and we pay for your dinner.
Right.
So
and you don't tell me where I can't go, which is great in St. Louis.
I haven't been noticing those receipts though. If they're going to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse
No. Jake's respect.
801.
Right. I don't roll up and go, I will have a bottle of wine for the table and a bottle of wine to take home as well.
Oh, yeah. The bottle of wine for the table, we could.
That's fair.
If we need it to persuade a prospective students, if you're watching and you come visit, we'll send you out to dinner with Jake, and it won't be to McDonald's or Jack in the Box.
We'll be going to the Hill and getting some good Italian food in St. Louis.
All right. That's good.
Yeah, well, Jake, we kind of messed around a bit as we introduced you of where you're at in your life. But before we get there, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your favorite color, what you like to do on Saturday.
Right. Favorite color, definitely blue. Easiest question.
All right.
But I'm from St. Louis, basically. My family moved around a lot. I was born in Illinois, unfortunately. Sorry for anyone who's listening from Illinois. Lived outside of New York City for a while, but we really settled here. My family's all from the same county down in southeast Missouri.
Missouri. Yeah, you know that you're not from St. Louis when you say Missouri.
It comes out. I did my vicarage out in Union, Missouri, and with Washington on Highway 44, and
there you go.
It comes out. But so my dad was, I'd say he hates when I do this, but he was a cowboy turned scientist is how I describe him really simply. He went to Mizzou for his PhD. So that was great. My mom was a teacher. She taught over here at St. Paul's de Pere for most of her career. That's where I knew her as a teacher. And so I grew up in St. Louis, graduated from Eureka High School 2012.
Okay.
I originally went to school for pre-med, found out I didn't like blood or any of the other nasty parts of medicine really quickly, and dropped that. And then
Did you faint in any of the classes or anything like that?
Well, when we were dissecting frogs and I was having a bad time, I thought, this is going to be even worse.
Oh, if it's a person,
Yeah.
for sure.
So
One time I was, my mom cut her finger. She was trying to cut ham slices apart, and the knife slipped, and she basically nearly severed the tendon and really cut quite a bit of into her finger. So we rushed to the emergency room, and I'm watching the doctor dig into this cut, and I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling well, and boom, down I went. So I ended up in the emergency room too. Oh man!
Whenever you talk about hands, I just get well, because then after I did pre-med, I moved into music, and I ended up getting my bachelor's of music in percussion performance.
Okay.
So like the idea of like my hands getting hurt at all just makes me
Pretty important.
very uncomfortable. But so I ended up getting that, and then I came to the seminary back. I started in 2017 with my MDiv, and like you said, I pulled that out, made that last as long as possible. Did the year in Oberursel, Germany, for the exchange program. That was awesome. And now I'm here working on my STM for one final year. And like I said, it's good to be out of the library. I'm right in the midst of PhD applications right now, which is a whole nother level of stress.
Are you, so just for listeners, right, you're talking about you went from your MDiv right into your STM. Were you double dipping in classes during your MDiv? And so this year, are you still in classes? Because we had a class together in the summer. So if you do have classes, it's few. Are you doing prep for, are you doing thesis or test route?
So I'm doing the exam route because I'm hoping to roll right into PhD, and the thesis doesn't fit too well into that.
Not necessarily.
But
don't write two major papers back to back. Yeah.
Right. But so no, I was double dipping. When you come back from vicarage in your fourth year, you can do the STM dual credit system, which is basically you pick a class that you like and you upgrade it, and the prof decides, well, okay, this is usually a 500, we'll make it an 800, and you owe me 2 extra papers and 5 more books, etc. Whatever it is to increase the level.
Wow, I need to up my game a little bit, because I don't think that I've ever assigned an STM roll-up 5 extra books.
Yeah, it's the professor
depends on the prof.
Depends on the prof. Well, everybody knows Haupt's easy.
Right. One professor just had me read 2 books and write a 5-page paper on each book, and the other one had me read 10 and then write a
major paper at the
end.
Write
a major paper at the end, which is more typical of a regular graduate class.
Right.
But
right. Yeah,
when you also have the other, you're not exempt from the rest of the class requirements.
Right.
So, yeah. That was great, and now I have one more year here to kind of roll it out. Yeah, we had class with Dr. Aaron together over the summer. That was great.
Talk a little bit about this. You mentioned Oberursel. So talk a little bit about that experience. What are you laughing at? The way I say it.
No, it's great. If anything, it's just jealousy.
They
That's all it is.
We talked. Did you talk with the students in Oberursel about how to say Oberursel? It's in Germany, and so the Germans.
I don't say Oberursel. Whatever you said, I say with a stronger Oberursel, and
that's how they say it in Missouri.
That's the. I had really bad pronunciation. I still do, but we did talk about it, and they're like, "You just get it wrong every time." And I'm like, "Sorry, it's the Midwest country boy in me coming out where I'm not going to get that right." There's when I was there, they were doing the big Passion play down in Bavaria that they always do at Oberammergau. And
That sounded
Ober
right.
Ammergau.
Well, that was just like the joke became. Some of the friends would just go, "Oh yeah, you went over there, in German. You went to Oberammergau," and just like roll it all together because it was just so bad. But yeah, went to Germany. That was
so you
great.
spent a year in Germany. What do you do there? You go over there. Obviously, it's a seminary as well. But what are some basic similarities and differences for prospective students who want to know how does this fit into the whole program of an MDiv?
Right. Well, I'm sure like you'd do the same thing. I fully recommend it 100%.
Yeah, it's a great experience.
It was great, but it's just a very different system. So they start at 18, and it's like an 8-year program with a 2-year vicarage, which is very different than our program.
Yeah, they basically don't go to, after high school or gymnasium, as they call it, they go straight into seminary rather than going to university
They
first.
go straight to the Hochschule, and then they have a year in the Universitätsjahr, but then they don't. It's just so different than us. But so you go there, and it's just kind of like being here. You take classes. If you're smart, you take the class schedule that lets you be free on Thursday and Friday like I did. So you can hop on a train and go to Munich or Berlin for a 5-day weekend every week. But it was great. I was able to get some credits to transfer, which was cool too, which is
nice.
Sometimes difficult, but it was great, and I got to kind of really get my German solidified. So yeah. And
what courses did you take, and which ones especially did you get credit for?
So the one I got credit for was just Society or like World of the New Testament. So just kind of a class on the lead up into the New Testament writings, the history, that intertestamental period that you just usually don't pay a lot of attention to. Kind of on that, and then the parties. So who are the Zealots and who are the Sadducees, etc. So that was really helpful. I really enjoyed that because there's not an equivalent class here for something like that.
Right. We don't teach what's called isagogics.
So that was great. My favorite classes were probably kind of a toss-up between either the history. I took a lot of history courses, and I took a lot of systematic courses. The history courses were cool and interesting just because, especially while I was there, I was visiting these places that are just names on a map.
Right.
It's a lot easier to understand that map that we see every year of the Holy Roman Empire when you at least kind of know where that stuff is.
Right.
But that was great. And then systematics, just kind of seeing how they approach theology and how they do things in a very different context. So those are probably my favorite things. And then just, they're very Lutheran, we're very Lutheran, but it's just they're in a different milieu, so they're asking different questions, tackling different problems.
There, talk about the nuns here. Man, Germany and Western Europe in general is much more atheist, agnostic, want nothing to do with religion as a percentage of the people than what America is.
Yeah, it was it's interesting. Obviously, when I'm in there, I'm visiting churches. But it was very interesting to go into like the Church of the Heiliger Geist in Heidelberg, where the Heidelberg Disputation happened right next door, and see this not being used really as a church, but preserved as just a cultural German artifact. Just something that the city, like, this is an important part of our city. It's kind of like, I guess, like the arch. It's like a huge deal. It's our sign, but that's kind of the significance of that thing. So that was really weird.
The church as museum rather than place of worship.
So I did Westwood House, and so you've taken full advantage. That's what I try to tell people all the time, especially so I do high school recruitment. I'm like, if you're in undergraduate school and your school has a study abroad program, I was like, don't even think about it, just do
100%.
it. Go experience a different part of the world. But talking about Western Christianity, in Edinburgh, there's like a big castle church down at the bottom from the castle. And I went there with some classmates, and we are going back to our hostel at night, and it's a club. It's right. It's just it kind of takes your breath a little bit, and it's like, oh man, because you have this incredible Gothic building that's probably been a staple of this place in the world for centuries. And it's a nightclub, but it's just
Things
it's just
happening
shocking.
there that
Yeah.
didn't used to happen.
Well, and
Exactly.
That was wild. I went to Ulm, to the Munster, the huge, tallest church in the world.
Yeah.
Went there, and they had an organ concert while I was there, so I went there, and big music guy. And the concert was great. They had is it okay if I date the podcast?
Oh, that's fine. We
Today's
do it all the time.
Today's like the day of right now where we honor like the German hymn writers, and one of them is Philip Gerhardt, and they sang a Gerhardt hymn, and it was beautiful in this huge, sanctuary. And then at the end, the priestess got up and prayed, and we're going to pray the Lord's Prayer, and she said, "But if you feel like praying to anyone else or anything else, just use these words as a medium to get to the divine," which is just, so
Different way of seeing things.
right. And sitting in this place that I knew like the history with Dr. Bodie had worked with Conrad Dietrich there, and it's just this huge center of Lutheranism as well, and Lutheran history, and then just hearing that of like different world.
Yep.
So
The Munster is an interesting edifice, and has some really interesting history. So on the outside, and I don't know if you saw this when you were there, but there are a couple of cages way up high in the spires, and the story is that they would put Protestant heretics up in those cages and basically lock people up in the spires until they perished, which is it's a pretty grueling sort of torture.
different age.
Different age.
Yeah.
But it's all there, and
Right.
you can go to these places, and this stuff actually happened. It didn't just happen in Rome or in Jerusalem.
Right.
But Christianity has been around for a very long time in Western Europe.
Yeah.
So you had your year in Oberursel. Talk to us a little bit about your formation here at the seminary. What was it like? What classes were formative? What experiences would you say really left a mark on you and made you into the person and theologian that you are today?
Real softball question there, Dr.
I
Haupt.
try.
It was pretty low. I was like, man, okay.
I mean, like they say.
Yeah. Some of the most formative experiences, I tell this a lot whenever I'm giving tours for his office. Some of the formative ones are just kind of being with the professors, and just there's like a huge thing of just sitting in class with them, talking to them in their office, going to churches and kind of seeing them preach and how they approach life. And then also, it's Prophenstein, so we're going to sit and have a beer and listen to them kind of tell, like, I don't want to say the real side of ministry, but some of the kind of more human, the real interactions that they had, and how they approached that, and how they tried to bring Christ into that situation, even if it was good, if it was bad, whatever it was, and just kind of learning like their overall kind of approach and understanding of the office was really formative. Class-wise, well, I'm currently doing a systematic focus, but I'm applying to history for my PhD schools, and I found the history classes to be super helpful of just kind of locating where we are, where we've been, and understanding why we are the way we are.
Yeah.
And that was something that came out in Oberursel as well. But yeah, history was really impactful for me of just kind of seeing the trajectory, and it helps. I think it helps me kind of when I'm dealing with someone who's reformed. I know what they're saying, but I can see where the divergent point was. So I try not to argue like, the far, far outside things. It's like, and this is where our actual point diverged in 1565 or whatever.
Right.
So that was that. And then You asked me about the formation, my favorite classes.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's pause on the history a little bit, because I do think that, lots of different people have lots of different opinions about the LCMS or what happens here at the seminary. But I think all of our programs are fantastic. But I think somebody even that's coming in from outside the Missouri Synod would really appreciate the perspective of our history department. We have our history department, which we've not talked a ton about with other students. We've had some historians on, but I think our history department does a really good job of grounding people and helping them to be historians, right? Yeah. So you have this little book on critical thinking that helps you to just be analytical, and especially about the historical time periods. We're not exacting the scriptures to historical criticism, for sure, but the history of the church, there's a lot of people that you'll read in our history department. We were just talking about this in faculty meeting yesterday, that the history department, the historians, want our students to read broadly throughout the history of the church, not just what's in our own LCMS tradition.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I love that of reading this broad. Like I was saying, like I took my Reformed Christianity. Were you in that, Micah?
No. We studies in creation, then I went on vacation.
That's right.
I was very close, because I'd be done with classes after this term if I had taken that class.
Okay.
But yeah, I would have been. I
would have been swamped.
Well, I mean, it would have been the only thing I had to do. But after, I went from intensives for PhD courses to Friday, and then Saturday I had vocatio. Vocatio ended.
That was right.
I got a breath of fresh air. Then studies of creation happened, and by the Friday, actually by the Wednesday of the second week, I was like, "What am I doing to myself right now?"
Right.
Vacation was 100% necessary.
Right.
I needed. I just went away, turned off the phone. It was nice. Yeah. But anyway.
But I was thinking of when you were talking to Dr. Haupt of the history department here. We've talked to some of me and my friends would always talk, and it would kind of be like the history department's the sleeper department, in that you don't think about them at all. Well, they're just not on the front of your mind.
Sure.
And then
it's the smallest of the four departments.
Right.
Right.
And you take a history class and you walk out and go, wow, that was great.
Yeah.
Would not have thought, wasn't on my mind, but it was great. And I think when you were talking there too, I was latching on to, I think every history class I've had recently really focuses on two things. Of number one, what we're reading is not prescriptive for today. That you don't go, what I'm working with a lot with Age of Orthodoxy, Lutheran Orthodoxy, and I don't go, okay, I'm going to take this without any critical thinking or any critical adaptation or work on it and just transplant it to today. I think it's super valuable to go and do good retrieval theology, but I'm not going to just, this is the way it always should have been, and I'm going to do it exactly like that in 21st century Midwest America.
Right. I mean, the Munster is a perfect example, right?
Right.
Even if
this
there's
is what
a
they did with the heretics, so
church squabbles today, I mean, most churches don't have a spire high enough to actually do this, but I mean, we clearly live in a very different day.
Yeah.
And historians help us to realize that, right?
Yeah. When you said that, I just thought of up on the spire of my future church and working and nailing a cage up there, and the Catholic priest across comes and says, "What's that about?" I go, anyway.
Well,
yeah, just would not. It's just completely fanciful.
Right. Right.
But that, and then also, I think I've already said a little bit of there's obviously the complete one way of dragging the past into the present, but then also thinking that the past doesn't matter at all.
Right.
This very offhanded thing of who has the time or who has the care to sit and read this stuff. It doesn't matter for me today. 500, why read Augustine then? Why do any of this stuff? But when you do, you kind of realize the lineage and the stand. Whose shoulders we're standing upon, which is huge.
Yeah.
Well, So I did a lot of history classes as well. And like you said, when you're there and you can see some of the places. So I did Reformation history, and one was English Reformation, which happened at the same time, but not completely separate than what was happening on the continent, but it was something different.
Some Lutherans lost their lives over in Scotland because Robert Barnes, is that the guy?
The good table guest of Martin Luther and Katie.
Yeah. And then went over to Scotland, and that was the end.
But then it's also interesting, kind of people from the continent at Trinity, they have on their chapel. It's a chapel, I think, and I could be wrong. And if you're a historian listening, just feel free to correct. I think it's Thomas Cranmer and Cromwell and Melanchthon and somebody else. So the guy from the Lutherans that they really liked was Philip Melanchthon. But then I took Continental Reformation.
You have to ask Sarah Crowder. Shout out to Sarah Crowder.
She'll know.
She knows. She's the kind of English Reformation historian, budding Reformation historian.
And Sarah's sharp. We have classes together now. I appreciate having her. And she's a teacher of faith where I visit frequently.
Yeah, I shouldn't say budding. She's not a budding historian. She is a historian. Keep going.
But for the Continental Reformation, where, I mean, for all intent and purpose, we focus heavily on Luther and the Lutherans, but they're just kind of one of the subjects, and you see what's going on all the way around it. It just gives you a different picture, especially then, like you said, when you go and visit these places and see it kind of physically, and obviously it's changed over centuries, but it's just one of these things that you go and you see it, you learn about it, you read about it. You don't necessarily transplant everything, but it does matter. And hopefully you get to this conclusion that for better or for worse, large parts, small parts, different parts are part of the Christian heritage that we now have and experience today, that Augustine has a significant role with how we practice and confess our faith. Yeah. And that's nearly 2,000 years ago. But it does matter. And what we believe, teach, and confess. Is it 1500? No. Like Augustine? Well, all right. Well, then 1600, if you want to be precise. Yeah. With the mathematics there. 1700. If we're going to do that.
Not 1700.
The 4th century, right? So that's 300 something. What was Nicaea? This is what, 348?
No, Nicaea is 325.
See? Yeah. So almost exactly 1700 years ago. So
for Nicaea, yeah.
There we go. Who's closer? I mean, you're closer originally, but anyway, we were both wrong.
We're all wrong.
Yeah, that's the point.
So I'm interested in trying to get us out of this debacle that we've just gotten ourselves into. I'm interested in the particular era of history that you are interested in. This era of Lutheran Orthodoxy.
The early modern period.
Modern period is another way of talking about it. Give us a time period. What years are we talking? And then my guess is that a lot of our prospective students and listeners on this podcast may not know a ton about the Age of Orthodoxy, as it's sometimes called. So just give us an introduction to this era.
Yeah, so typically the age would start about 1580 with the Book of Concord as kind of the transition moment from the Reformation proper into the early modern period, Age of Lutheran Orthodoxy.
Luther dies in 1546.
Yeah, and then
Book of Concord, 1580.
And you have all the kind of controversies that are going on within the Lutheran camp, which necessitate the development in the formula, et cetera. And that comes out in 1580. So Martin Chemnitz is kind of the big transitional figure. And then 1580 to about 1700, 1750 in that period would be a typical kind of, it's the Freuenoisite, the early New Times, early modern period that you would kind of locate. But it's also the period of kind of confessionalization of, okay, it's 80 years, well, we're in the 4th, 5th generation of Lutheranism, of having Lutherans. Okay, who are we? This is when you get like the Kirchenordnungen, the church orders of how we're going to be the church. What does it mean to be a Lutheran church? What does that look like? How are we not reformed? That's actually a question we have to answer now. And how are we going to kind of see? Well, we've not been with Rome for 100, 150 years now. How does that look? And So I find that very interesting again and I find that part interesting in that we're always trying to figure out what does it mean to be Lutheran? What does it look like to be Lutheran? So looking back at them and seeing, okay, how did they decide this? How did they respond to the troubles? Because there's a lot of troubles in that period. I mean, the biggest one is obviously the 30 Years' War, of which just devastates Germany. The statistic is lost now, but if you look at maps of like the devastation and death in the 30 Years' War, it's like half the population, and you've got people just rampaging across the continent, bands of mercenaries coming from Sweden, from France, from the Habsburgs in the east, up from Italy. It's just a complete nightmare. And then in the midst of this, you still have good pastors trying to guard souls and care for people's salvation. So I find
1618 to 1648. Does that sound right?
Yeah, but it's minus 1 year because it ends like 3 months before.
Okay.
But so that's
the 29 and 3/4 years war doesn't have quite the same ring.
Doesn't make a good title for a book. But so I find that super interesting. And then my personal interest as well is historically it's kind of placed into this period of you have after the real Reformation, you have the period of orthodoxy, and then you enter into the period of pietism, which is commonly in our circles derided of, we lost the pure gospel, we started caring more about the soul and the spirit, and then with the confessional revival, with Walther, in that period, this is where we drew our stance on that we are the heirs of the Orthodox fathers. Up until very recently, we were reading, Dr. Bodie told me this of, the examination of the Council of Trent, Volume 1 on the Scripture and the Fathers that was our textbook for how do I read the Bible and how do I read the history. So we're the heirs of this, and we kind of deride pietism as a period, as a change. But there's this constant kind of push, ebb and flow between the academy and the lay culture, between this kind of high scholastic learning that kind of marks pietist method, Orthodox method.
Yeah, it's sometimes even called the age of scholasticism, right?
Because the Reformed are fighting the same thing, and the Reformed call it Reformed scholasticism. We don't like to use the scholasticism.
Right. Too Catholic for us.
Too Catholic, and we want to be a little separate. But when I read, we always think of Gerhard as the kind of the pinnacle, and this is what I'm reading a lot right now, of Gerhard has his sacred meditations that are translated and published, and just beautiful meditations on the divine grace that God shows to us. And you can see the love of faith, the love of Christ, the love of God, and how that matters for people. But then we act like his Lotzi, which are, I think it's 3,500 pages of just dense method and intensity, is just so high learning, and is just concerned with philosophical presuppositions and getting the right answers, and people say it goes too far. But then you read it, and this is what I'm working on right now. At the end of all these chapters, he has the usus practicus, this practical use of this theology, and it's just the purest kind of, this matters for your salvation or your Christian life. This tells you how to do this. So that was a long tale of it. But
no, it's helpful, and I think sometimes the characterization of this period after Luther and after some of these initial controversies get settled, and you have kind of a Lutheran church proper, is that this scholasticism or orthodoxy doesn't have a lot of room for personal piety, and especially as pietism then gets taught, it's no, this era didn't care about piety, and then this pietism era comes in and says, as kind of a corrective, and says we need this piety. And what I think you're interested in is actually some of that piety in that scholastic, very high learned era, right?
Right. The piety of the Orthodox, and they care, and they're saying, well, and there's this middle work that's being translated between, for Gerhard, of the Lotzi and the Sacred Meditations, Schola Pietatis, the School of Piety, and it's just all about faith is to pursue godliness. Pursue godliness. It's all about what does it look like, what does that mean. So he's obviously concerned, and then it's not like the pietists are going, we don't care what you believe. it gets a little wild at the end. But
That's what years of fighting will do, though.
yeah. Johann Arndt, for example, which I've read some of his True Christianity, is saying you got to believe right still. You can't just make it up.
Right.
I'm really interested in that kind of the balance, because it's always a issue of, we talk about it here all the time, of how much do you give, how much of like how many Latin words do you write down on the board in a Bible study, and how many times do you just come down and just lay out the pure, unadulterated message of the church, message of Jesus, message of God. So that's, yeah.
So in what ways, besides just this kind of like all out having wars about the confession of the faith, which happens during the 30 Years' War, in what other ways is the age of orthodoxy different than our age? That's also a softball question, but I think this is the historical question where we're saying this is really interesting. There's some things that they have to say to us, and yet it's not repristination. It's not just
the grabbing and transplanting,
uncritically saying, and this is exactly how we should do it for today.
I mean, the one that I thought of immediately, and probably the easiest answer, is that we're post-Enlightenment and they're pre-Enlightenment. Yeah. So our worldview is just substantially different inherently in who we are. As I'm thinking of like Charles Taylor, Secular Age, like we have the option to not believe, and that's just it's such a completely different world. That it's possible not to believe. You have options of what to believe, and they had options of Reformed and Lutheran and Catholic, but
kinda not really, right?
Exactly.
If you lived in somebody's territory, there was only, because of the Peace of Westphalia after 1648, your territory has a confessional church stance. You're either Roman Catholic in your territory, or you're Lutheran, or you're Reformed, and if you don't like it, you can sit up in that cage up on the
church tower. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so even for church history, because this is something that came up in studies of creation, it's, again, I think sometimes we can get in the habit of the parochial nature of the church kind of being the reality of the world, to where we think that, well, Lutheranism happened in Germany, kind of isolated from everything else in the world. But in studies in creation, something that I just never considered before, and even though I studied science, is that Copernicus was publishing his cosmology at the same time of the Reformation, and was encouraged by Melanchthon to do so. And he changed the shape of the universe. And and not only the shape of the universe, but the material of the universe as it was thought of. And you can't really underestimate what that does to the human mind. And well, if the universe doesn't mean this, and what I'm looking at isn't unchangeable and permanently fixed, what does that mean? And all these questions of what does this mean beyond just kind of the very simple become grand, and people are trying to not just answer them out of exploratory. It's not like modern science today per se, like you said, where you have people who don't care about the church, or either atheist or agnostic, or kind of enemies of the church, trying to disprove God by the expanse of the universe. But you have people who are trying to say, well, now that we know this, what does it mean in our relationship to God, and our place in the cosmos?
What does our new understanding of creation mean to our relation to the Creator, and how does that? Yeah.
And how does all this shape? And you just, again, the rapid growth of again, sciences in the academy and stuff like that. It's just challenging stuff to deal with, along with trying to maintain a confessional culture, and also trying to define what it means to be Lutheran. That's a tough context to grow up as a church.
Right. How do we take the truth that is inviolable, it doesn't change, and how do we put that into our milieu that we have right now in our world? And how do we see, okay, well, you did it this way, and you were suffering from this problem and this issue, and we have slightly different questions, but what can we learn from looking back? So,
Yeah.
I'm very interested in what we're going deep into like history and theology.
We told you
here.
this was going to be a nice,
And
relaxing episode.
I love it. I love it. So
you were over there looking up dates and history beforehand. You said you were just looking at food, but
yeah,
now you're
we did have some good Äpfelwein. You were talking earlier about getting together with professors, and that was definitely a highlight of my year, is sitting at my kitchen table and having some Äpfelwein, which I still am very appreciative of. Germans make great wine out of apples, and we wouldn't have it at the Concordia Wine Society, but
why though?
Because it's not really wine.
Sounds a little judgy there.
That's exactly what it is.
I am judgy. I'm bougie. Our listeners know this about me.
Yeah.
Snobby and all the rest of it. But no, I'm interested in. All right, so hang with me for just a second. I'll unpack this a little bit. Working on an independent study with a student right now, and we're thinking about and talking about how should churches today think about place and their relationship to the community. So at the Peace of Westphalia, you get this, who's the region,
and the Peace of Westphalia is?
Peace of Westphalia is the end of the 30 Years' War in 1648, right? Am I right on that?
Yes.
Yeah. So, or 1647 and 3/4. So at this peace, basically the peace treaty is, depending on whichever region in Western Europe people live in, the ruler of the region gets to choose the confession. So if the ruler is Roman Catholic, that region is all of a sudden, everybody in that region is going to have Roman Catholic churches, and that's going to be the confession of that region, right? And if you have a Lutheran prince, then you're going to have a Lutheran church in that region. So this whole idea of parishes, where if you are living in this zip code, they didn't have zip codes back then, but if you're living in this region, you basically are a member of this particular Lutheran church, and there are no choices. There was no church shopping in the age of Orthodoxy. But today, obviously, I mean, it's not just like you can choose which Lutheran church you want to belong to, but you could choose to be a member at the Methodist Church or the Roman Catholic parish, which are probably all like right next to one another, on Church Row, or you could choose not to go to church at all. So what does that do to how the people in the age of Orthodoxy presented the gospel, and how they talked about the church and its relationship to community, relationship to state? How different that is from the age in which we're living, right? Sorry, big question. This wasn't meant to be an exam, but
no, I think that
I'm just fascinated by how radically different our age is from. It's a huge question, and I don't know that we have all the answers, but I do think that in our day, we tend not to think about place because it's all about personal choice, right? And so local churches don't actually think about their relationship to the community. So after the Peace of Westphalia, the church in this local region, it was really important how the community was going, because church and community were all one, and we're all kind of fused together.
And church world is just this is
our parish.
This is it.
And our parish means the place where I raise my hogs, and the parish is the place where all of my parents and grandkids live. And
I think you just that might be the kind of answer to your question, because I'm thinking of just this was easier in my experience with like rural churches of like, well, the pastor better be at all the FFA tractor pulls.
Right.
Needs to be walking through the 4-H tent, like, and kind of bringing God into all these places. And in your Bible study, it's not just a time to just dive into the scripture, but also kind of show, oh, wow, how God's working, what God's doing. And there isn't this, you can fight against the kind of wall of separation, but this is all God's world, whether it's inside the halls of the church or if it's inside the halls of the bank, the school, the barn, whatever it is. This is all God's place of operation. So that might be kind of, there's something to learn there of seeing whenever like Luther and then those who follow do this three estates thing of like, this is all under God's control.
Yep.
The city, the church, the home, it's all under God's authority. So that might be a place of a very simple answer to your big question.
Well, and what I like about that is, on the one hand, our worlds are radically different, and yet there is this bold confession that everything that you see is God's. It might have made a little bit more kind of common sense to people
you could
in the
assume
17th century, right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting and really helpful to bring that voice into the 21st century, in which there's radical choice and everybody gets to choose their own thing, to still claim that there's only one world and it all belongs to the Creator God who sent His Son into this one world among human beings. That's kind of a radical claim,
Right.
and it's not obvious.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, well, that makes sense, and it helps me to understand my world. In some ways, that their voice kind of complicates how we do life, because I think it's easy for people in the 21st century to just go, well, you have your thing and I have my thing, and we'll just agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it makes it more challenging as well, because you have all of these competing narratives, not just because of differences in opinion and differences in culture, or even differences of your favorite news station, and just in common day life. And then you have all of like human and societal development over a few centuries, and then you have this text that is 2,000 years old at its newest, around, let's estimate, right, or older. And then people always have that question, because of how they've been primed to interact with the past. How relevant is what Paul wrote today on social issues, or what people consider to be social issues? And then in the church, and especially if you have people, if you're really engaged in your neighborhood who didn't grow up in the church, now in the church, and they spent a lifetime thinking a particular way about the world, about other people, and now they run against this text for the first time that says something that's very confrontational, either to them or to somebody that they know and they love. And then as the teacher, right, you have to take God's word and into all of these different spaces, inside, outside the walls, and you have to equip and prepare these people and care for their souls. What voice is right in that context? And I've found myself saying this more and more in a lot of different places, but in particular in my church plant that I'm the vacancy pastor. I didn't plant it. In the church plant that I'm the vacancy of is, well, when we run into these places, it's not me who shapes God's word. Rather, it has to be God's word that shapes me and redefines reality. And sometimes that can be tough, and sometimes that can take time. But these are still the questions that they're asking, and that's the point. These historical questions, these are the same exact questions that they're asking themselves in the Peace of Westphalia, that they're asking themselves in the Reformation, that they're asking each other in the medieval times, that they're asking each other at the Council of Nicaea.
Who is God? What does that how does that impact me? What does this mean for the world and the world to come? Whatever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
And you have this text that, again, historically we're distanced from, and this is the rule and norm. And it's not always easy to just read and accept. I think that's part of the thing that in teaching, where in a class with Dr. Veltz recently, and it's the little things that are the most profound. When we were in class, he was like, a good theologian never says something is obvious, because it's usually not. And so we're like, you'll be like, well, obviously Paul says this. No, it's never obviously Paul says this, because Paul says this, and what does it mean? And it's challenging. So removing the assumption, right. I think that's a challenge for us today. And then not thinking that anything that we teach or say or do in the church is obvious to people around us. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah,
I think that's huge.
So I threw you a softball question, then I threw you a stumper question.
I was going to say, I don't know, man.
And then, so now I'm going to throw you another softball. And shift gears. So we were just talking about belief in God and all the implications this has for life. One of the really interesting implications that you've done some research on and some thinking on is, what does it mean to be a single Christian? To be a Christian who is not married, who is single. You've recently given a talk on this at our theological symposium, and I think especially for prospective students that might be coming into the seminary who are single, we've had some episodes where we've talked about kind of what's life like as a single person, but if our listeners know anything from listening to this so far, you're not just giving the practical things. You're going to take us deep into theology and make us think. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on what does it mean to live the vocation of a single Christian?
Well, there's an interesting the vocation of singleness. Is singleness even a vocation? Is one question. But so, yeah, I did present at the symposium. What was the title? Developing a Vocabulary of Singleness. And it was received well, but this was kind of spurred on by my own experience. I'm 29. I'm single, having been in the church for 29 years as a single person. The church can often tend to, I think in our circles, tend to be a family-oriented church rather than a family-friendly church. And of course, that's how I began my paper, and I'll say it again. There's nothing wrong with being married and having kids. This is not an elevation of singleness above. I'm not trying to say, us single seminarians over in ISO. That's really like the Christian life. That's not the argument. But it was trying to go but single people still matter and are still members of the church and are still Christians redeemed by Christ. And then just hearing I've been here for 6 years, almost 6 years, and then hearing before of there's just someone waiting, by next year, I heard this, by the time you go on vicarage, you'll have a wife. By the time you get back from you'll find a wife on vicarage. You'll find a wife in Germany. You'll find a wife in your 4th year. And I'm like, great. And that's just kind of set up as this is the goal. And it always kind of seemed to me, and from the research I did, it falls into pretty much of it's almost a maturity narrative. So in the church, how do you become a full adult, a full member? First, you're baptized. That's the beginning of it's like a story. That's the beginning of your story is baptism, where you're put in with the water and the word, etc. And then you go through confirmation and catechesis, and that's kind of your adolescence. You're growing up, and you keep getting catechized. You go and receive the Lord's Supper, and then you kind of achieve maturity and adulthood at your marriage. While we may not see marriage as a sacrament in the Lutheran Church, we still see it as this big moment of kind of, now come the expectations. Okay, now you're married and you have kids, etc. Now you need to come to voters' meetings. Now.
And at some point in there even is this narrative of if you left church after catechism class, when you get married and have kids, then you'll for sure come back to church. So it essentially says, we equate those that aren't in church with being single, right? And they're kind of sowing their wild oats as single people, and they'll come back once they get married and have kids.
Right. And there's a problem with that, in that the average age for marriage of men is 31 based on the 22 census, and the average age for women is 29. So say your mom makes you go to school until you're 18 as a young woman, and then you get married at 29. that's 10, and you left the church after that. That's 10 and 11 years where you didn't go to church, think about God, think about Christ. That's 29 years where God had no input in your life, essentially.
And maybe even especially is that maybe they did think about God or think about Christ, but maybe the church wasn't thinking about them.
Yeah. And then so it just gets scorned.
Yeah.
And then I balk at the assumption that after a decade of nothing, the wedding ceremony, the pregnancy, the birth is going to make this young woman suddenly go, it's time for me to get back going to church at 8 o'clock every Sunday.
Statistically, we know that that's just happening less
But
and less.
you hear that all the that's
Yeah.
don't worry, they'll come back.
Right.
Will they?
Well, and then the kind of expectations we have for them when they do decide to come back, as if a decade outside of the church and not practicing their faith amongst other believers isn't going to impact them, right? I mean, it's one of those now where I appreciate that paper. I wasn't around for the symposium just because I was out on a recruiting trip, and I remember seeing that paper. I was thinking I would have loved to hear it because I didn't go to the Concordia Deaconess Conference over the summer, but they had another thing on singleness there. I'm glad it's being highlighted because just like everybody, and maybe it's just becoming more visible generationally, but I graduated high school, went through confirmation, had a big youth group. Other friends went off to college, whatever, but I stayed in St. Louis, and I went to my home congregation, and now I was too old to participate in the youth group. There was nothing for young adults, let alone single young adults, but nothing for young adults. And it was kind of like, well, you're an adult now. Like, you're 18. Like, it's the adults group. And it's going to, I don't know, wine country with my parents and the older generation, which, again, I'm not opposed to multi-generational stuff. But when you're 18-year-old kid, that's not the thing. That's not the thing kind of that's going to connect you to the church. And I always tell people now, and it doesn't feel empty, but like there is still Sunday, there's like divine service, but if you want people to be around the church, the social aspect of being around other believers and brothers and sisters in Christ is actually really important.
Huge.
And we just, I still don't know if we've really figured that out.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I talked about this of like a lot of single groups for 18, the college age, just entering the workforce age, is like very meat markety as well. That their success of the singles group is determined by how quickly it becomes defunct. How long till we can cancel this program because we have no more single people in our congregation is like the measure of success. But so all of that and kind of just my own experiences, my own hearing of what's going on, and then talking with, and this is for guys who might be considering coming here and women, of watching just like the complete, I don't want to say devastation, or just desperation is a better word. The desperation of I need to get married right now. Like I feel bad. For example, guys who come from like a Concordia and didn't get married before they came to seminary.
Especially if all the rest of their friends are getting married.
Yeah.
That was my experience.
Yeah. And, it feels bad.
Yeah.
And they're having fun and they're married. It's like, and they're saying, this is the life, this is it. And it's like, well, what about me? And I see them go like, hearing guys say they get a girlfriend and they're like, I'm finally happy now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you haven't been happy? Like for 25 years, you've been sad? Like, man, that's awful. That's not what Christ should be doing. And like, so then the whole kind of thing that I settled on of this vocabulary and how we should talk about singleness is actually, you could talk about it with any Christian. I think I said it was very unoriginal, but just kind of landing any way we think about single people in their identity, their in their identity, their value, and their belonging. And all three of those things are tied up in Christ.
Yep.
So like their identity is not that they're single. That is not their primary identity marker.
Right.
And I think, sorry, you said I'm going to get into high theology and big things, but like,
No, it's good.
thinking about it of like, we had the sexual revolution, and the church had to fight against it. So the church rightfully, very rightfully said, this is what God says about how he wants you to have a sexual relationship, how he wants you to live with your mate, etc., in these guidelines. But in that fight, singleness got excluded as a common thing. So then we responded essentially by playing the world's game of what is your primary identity? Oh, it's your sexual relationships. It's your sexual identity. This is who you are.
Yeah.
And the game changed over 50 years, and we're still playing an old battle. And the identity question is still being like, how do we fight sexual identity? Well, we tell you how to have sex correctly. Yeah. But the real answer, I argue, is that the identity is that who you are in relation to Christ.
Yeah.
That's your primary identity marker. Not saying that God created sex, et cetera, it's all matters, but this is who you are. You are a Christian. You've been washed and redeemed in the blood of Christ. So that was the first one. And then value, this is returning all the way back along to the very beginning of your question, Dr. Haupt, of is it the singleness as a vocation? This is how Paul talks in 1 Corinthians of like, what is it for? What does it enable you to do? What is its purpose?
As opposed to just talking about it as a lack of
Yes.
a mate, a
deficiency.
a person who isn't married.
Right.
It's putting forward a positive vision
Right.
of what does it mean to be
You
single.
can pray unceasingly. You get the life of the angels. You get to do this thing as the angels do.
Yeah.
And like you have more time. I mean, I hear this from guys all the time.
Mobility.
You have mobility. You have I had the ability to go to Germany for a year,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I grasped that option. So you have more opportunity. So don't squander it. And this is another thing of like you have this value, so chase it down. Don't sit in your dorm and lament not being with a girl or a man. Do what you're supposed to.
Yeah.
Chase out your hobbies, chase out your vocations, and et cetera.
Serve your neighbor. Yeah.
And as you were talking about identity and things like that as well, it made me immediately, I went to Becca Lucas and her thesis on the family, recapturing family. And I did Westwood House, so I was a 5-year seminarian. But we were a class of guys, a lot of us didn't come in with Greek, and there were guys that didn't want to take summer classes for a couple of years to graduate on time. So there were about 13 of us that were in our 5th year of the seminary, a couple in the STM program. And we just called ourselves the 5-year Mafia. And every Sunday we had...
I heard that you're the mafia boss, by the way, the other day. Somebody told me
we don't
that.
talk about these things. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. You were at Lee's church.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly who it was. Lee Hope. Shout out to Lee Hope.
Man,
Great
I
pastor.
love that guy, and a very dear brother in Christ. And that was the thing. Like, we had family dinner. That's why it was a mafia thing. And sometimes people would host it at their apartment or the house they were renting, or we did it in the Bennett Center, and somebody was in charge of like the main part of the dish, and everybody brought sides. Talitha was a little baby, Johnny was a little toddler, and it was just a family. It wasn't like anybody who had kids was any different. It was everybody, and that's the, when I was talking about we haven't quite figured it out, I'm thinking about those mafia days. It doesn't have to be programmatic. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But we also didn't ask the single guys, so who you're looking at and looking to get married. You just don't do that type of stuff. And even for the people who were married, we didn't say, so when are you going to have kids? Maybe they've tried, maybe they're not.
Right.
And so, like you said, that vocabulary, a way of approaching it, but then also, even more importantly, the way that you just see everybody in the church as a brother or sister in Christ. And the thing that really, I think I might have done it in practice, but it's always better to hear explanation of it. When Becca said that her sons are her brothers in Christ.
Yeah.
And now when I look at my sons and my daughter Talitha, these are my brothers and my sister in Christ.
Yeah.
I have a vocation to them as their father,
that's so good.
but my relationship to them and my ultimate identity is a redeemed child of God. And that is the way that we should approach, begin. I don't want to say end, but you don't need to necessarily move beyond somebody's life beyond that within the church.
Yeah. Very real kind of, that was one of the research that I really liked of the value of single people is that they remind people that the bonds of blood and physical bonds are not what define us in God, like in God's kingdom.
Yeah.
That there is still value, there's still meaning in because you are with Christ, now you have value. And then as you were saying about the mafia, I love that. I had my crew. We made subdivisions of my crew, my one class, but
You guys did it right though.
yeah, we had the squad, and that was like the third thing I always emphasize is like belonging. Like you belong with the mafia, I belong with my friends, I belong with these brothers and sisters in Christ. And that's a huge thing for single people. I mean, they belong in the church, they belong with Christ, they belong with the men and women of God. So, yeah, and the same thing of we weren't asking each other, why aren't you married yet? Or chip, chop, chip on getting those babies out. Like, this is just, we're here, we belong. And there were married people. I remember there was Jake Toberfest before I left for Germany, which was just like everyone. And it wasn't weird, it wasn't strange. And then had about 20 people go down to the farm and swim in the pool and run around. And so there's infants walking around and me single and other single guys, and then married couples just living and belonging here where we're at.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the long answer of the question of just kind of what does it mean to be single and and be in the church? It just means that your identity is tied up in Christ, your value is tied up in His kingdom, and you belong here in the church, His kingdom on earth right now.
So good.
So
this has been a fantastic conversation, and intellectually stimulating for me, which I really appreciate. And as our listeners know, we have a lot of different guests, but this episode in particular, we went deep.
Yeah.
And that was really good. I do have an appointment that keeps my eye on the clock, so we do need to make it to this next segment called "Ripe for the Picking" or "Leave It on the Tree." So I'll start with a really oddball one that came to me this morning while I was brushing my teeth.
Okay.
Ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree, cinnamon toothpaste. And I'm thinking particularly of, I had to look this up right before we started, Close Up. Do you remember Close Up toothpaste? Maybe not.
no.
No, it's like the ultimate cheap toothpaste.
Okay.
And so, or just cinnamon toothpaste in general. Can you, if you've never even tried this, what would be your sense? Ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree?
Just leave it on the tree, 100%. The only thing that cinnamon that I can stand is Fireball, and I hate that too. And I don't care for that. I think I tried, like, they have cinnamon flavored like paste at the dentist, and I went, shoot, and I thought, wow, this is great. You're like digging spicy things into my gums. No, it's just big leave it on the tree.
Yeah, I would say it's particularly the toothpaste. I like cinnamon in a lot of things, but not in my toothpaste.
No.
Yeah, leave it on the tree.
Yeah, big leave it on the tree for me. Again, I do like cinnamon on things, but like, there's nothing more annoying than if my toothpaste is gone and I have to use like the kids' bubble gum.
Oh yeah,
I like, and so it's for toothpaste. I just want mint.
Yeah,
and I don't even want
clean,
generic mint, which is I think usually peppermint. It's nice and easy.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I feel like cinnamon makes your breath. Anyway.
Yeah, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
It's like Big Red. Big Red did not
No.
make your breath smell better.
No. All right, here we go. For Ben's sake, right onto it, right for the pick and leave it on the tree. Sriracha.
Right for the picking. I could put sriracha. Well, I'm a big spice guy.
Okay.
Ask any of the Fresh Idea cafeteria workers. My order is always extra jalapenos with a side of hot sauce. Sriracha, go over here to like Corner 17 or like Asian restaurant, dump that on there. That is mint.
Got it.
I bet the camera's picking this up already. I can
Starting
feel
to
my
sweat.
pores opening up, and Dale's probably getting his powder out right now. I can just feel my forehead's like beating up. No, man, sriracha is absolutely leave it on the tree for me.
Even
100%.
for the flavor, like you can't.
I don't think I've ever tried sriracha.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we along with our pork rinds or pork skins or whatever. We'll have to have a Hot Ones episode at some point.
That would be great. I just want to see. You might die.
Oh, I would. Yeah, it would be awful.
Like I don't know how far we'd be able to get, but it would be class, man. It would be incredible.
People would just laugh. I'd have to wear a shirt that you can see me just like pitting it out.
There's the end of season 2 right there.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Right before your sabbatical. Yeah, no, it's right for the picking for me. I'm at the point where like I do like spicy food. I would say more times than not, just because getting up there in age, going to bed, too many spicy foods.
That heartburn.
100%. But yeah, sriracha, the flavor and the heat from sriracha is actually not bad. It's just a nice little spice. It's got a good flavor to it. Yeah, it's good. Nice little Thai chili paste.
We did not plan this out. We never plan our things.
Yeah, you
we
lied
never know
to me.
what.
You told me it was going to be easy.
Well, I have another one. We're on the theme of spices today, and I promise that I picked this before I knew that you were going to be talking about spices as well. Right for the picking, or leave it on the tree. Turmeric.
Turmeric?
It's this yellowy spice.
It's an Indian spice,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I've ever used turmeric for anything other, so that'd be... Is it right for the picking in the right circumstance? I don't know.
Could be. It's up to you.
Right for the picking.
Ripe for the picking. Okay. Yeah, it's absolutely ripe for the picking for me. So it's not just for Indian dishes. I put some in my coffee grounds in the morning before I brew my coffee. This morning I had it in my overnight oats. We've talked to our viewers and listeners about overnight oats before. Micah gave us all of his thoughts on overnight oats.
Still haven't tried them yet.
They're so good. But yeah, I put a whole bunch of turmeric in mine this morning, and it was just fantastic.
What does it do to your coffee? I mean, it's not a very strong taste.
Yeah. Well, first,
I mean, I guess it could be.
It's really good as kind of an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory.
Right.
But it also just provides kind of a nice fall.
Sure.
Kind of getting toward like pumpkin spice, but not all the like overdone nutmeg and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, turmeric's lovely. I like it. It's nice. I
All
like
right.
to put on stuff when I can. It's not a spice that I immediately reach out to, but I like making curry. I have a sister-in-law from Chennai, and she's taught me how to do it. I'm not as good as her and her family, but I think I make a decent one. But yeah, turmeric's nice. It's good. Interesting. All right. I had 3 food ones selected. I just think we've gone too far on the food side. So I'm going to try to
Ooh, man, now you've challenged me.
dial it in a different direction. And I don't want to be too broad and generic. All right. Yeah. Right for the picking or leave it on the tree. I Love Lucy.
That's a leave it on the tree. I don't know if I've ever even seen an episode of I Love Lucy.
Okay. No Nick at Night?
Were you leave the TV on when you were sleeping?
Oh,
kind of?
yeah, 100%.
No.
I still am to some extent. It's just my phone instead.
No.
I try not to, but bad sleeping hygiene.
No, leave it on the tree. No.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there have been a few episodes of I Love Lucy that I appreciated. There are some funny bits, but overall, I would say I wouldn't prefer to watch an episode. And if somebody really kind of pressed me to watch one, I think even then I'd probably get up. So it's a leave it on the tree for me.
Sure. Yeah. Let's leave it on the tree for me as well. I mean, I know of it. I know. I said Nick at Night just because I knew when it came on.
Yeah.
I try not to leave the TV.
I thought you were getting ready to come and say that we're going to go watch that after this.
No, call me what you want. I don't really like black and white TV. Because I was born in 1984. I'm a millennial. It is what it is.
Born in
not that I can't.
1984.
Is that a song?
Yes, but
Okay.
we won't go there.
All right.
Okay.
This is one of these pop culture references that only Ben gets. I feel like now you have to name the song.
It's by Bo Burnham. But it's born in 1964, not 1984.
Okay.
Never
All right.
mind.
Well, never mind. Yeah.
Now
Leave it on the tree. Yeah. That comment and I Love Lucy.
My kids are probably like, "Oh,
This is exactly why we do this segment.
Yeah. All right. Last ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree from me. Cash. Do you carry cash? Dollar bills?
It's going to be your Bitcoin thing.
I'm not.
He knows. He knows.
I'm not going for the Bitcoin thing. Although, if you want to talk about Bitcoin, I'm always game.
No,
Our listeners know that.
I think cash. I think cash is still king, right for the picking.
Wow.
I mean, you don't have to do. I get Venmo, and that's helpful, but like, it's just so easy. And so, like, here's $20.
Yeah.
Just take it. Easy.
I like the Ray Dalio phrase, "Cash is trash." So it's leave it on the tree for me. I don't know when somebody hands me a bill. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? I can't, like, I'm not going to carry this around. It's
Put it in your
so
wallet.
impractical to me. Like, take this wad of cash and like ball it up. And
Is that how you carry cash?
Just a giant wad of paper in your pocket.
falling out of my pants pockets. No, it's just
all the amount of money from
Right,
all
the-
this Bitcoin.
The problem is that he's just got so much money, and it's just
it's just all ones, but
Ben's wallet doesn't fold.
keep
That's his
going.
problem. I don't carry it, but yeah, cash is fine. It's right for the picking. Like, I will say this: not only am I annoyed when, like, now where you can't use Verifone, the fact, like, if I have to actually like swipe or insert the chip, even I find that annoying. But especially
it's so much easier than like
that it
digging
is.
into
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, electronic payments are convenient, but even
everything that I need
but-
in this.
but the level is, I get angry when places don't take Apple Pay. It's 2023.
Yeah, exactly.
But especially if they don't have Verifone, like, what? It's annoying.
Here it is. So I went to Busch a couple of times, obviously Cardinals fan, and
Busch Stadium.
Yeah, Busch Stadium, and the beer guys going up the aisle don't take cash anymore. That's annoying to me.
Okay.
Like,
Neither-
just to pass a 20 down the aisle.
Neither does Southwest. Yeah.
Uh,
It's
like-
2023.
I don't know, man. I don't like, because I'm sitting like in the middle of the row, and I want my Bud Select, and
These youngsters these days.
well, and he like, I have to like now pass your card down. I'm like, I don't want to pass my
Yeah,
credit card
that's
down.
crazy.
Pass.
Yeah.
You know what
10
the
people I
other
don't
thing
know.
you can do if somebody's bringing Budweiser products to you, you can just say, "No thanks, I'll pass."
It's brewed for the Lou, man.
Oh,
Bud Select's brewed for the Lou.
it used to be. It used to be.
Yeah, it's
but
gone
it
national
isn't
now.
anymore. Now it's just sell out. All right.
all right, last one for me. Right for the pick and leave it on the tree. Fries with the skin on.
Oh, right for the picking, 100%. Yeah,
Yep.
the skin has a little bit of crunch. It's a little. That's what I call the flavor.
Yeah. Right for the picking. 100%. Wendy's fries are hands down the best fries.
Okay,
Oh,
well,
that's
see,
a whole
you
different
got
thing.
really outrageous there.
That's what this segment's for. It's true. So it's been great to be with you today. You don't like Wendy's fries?
I didn't say-
You're
No,
not
no,
going to say
Wendy's-
that you like McDonald's fries.
They are
you?
better than Wendy's.
You didn't.
Oh
you
my
didn't say
gosh.
that. Do you like Wendy's fries?
Right,
You said they're the best.
They are.
They're not.
And
No way,
anybody
man.
that likes McDonald's fries, you've got to be kidding me.
No, they are
No.
delicious.
They're
That's
a
like
vibe.
1984.
I'll take it.
Oh.
That's not offensive to
Okay.
me. It's just, it is what it is. McDonald's fries they're right for the pick.
Soggy, nasty.
Wendy's fries.
How long do you take to eat them?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, anyway, I sometimes I just can't with
That
that.
is wild. Wendy's?
Yeah, over
Wendy's
McDonald's.
fries because they have skin on them.
This is a cat's. This is a cat's right for the picking. The comments are going to let you have it. I have faith in our listeners.
That's fine.
I
That's
have
fine.
faith.
It's not nearly as offensive as what I said about cats way back in the day.
I came up with this one because I was watching a short, and somebody had this device and it was electronic, and it just like was a potato slicer. Like, you could just do it by hand, but like electronic things are nice. It
All
was
right.
cool. Yeah, and that's leave the skin on the fries. Wendy's fries. There's so many other places you could have said, but the fact that Wendy's, I found that to be very stereotypical. I'm not that surprised, actually.
That's just a huge conversation. Crinkle cut, waffle cut, straight, shoestring.
I mean, so if we're going that deep, crinkle cut fries are my favorite. Mm-hmm. They're good.
Culver's fries slap.
So many different opportunities for different texture on a crinkle cut fry.
Yeah.
And the salt gets down in them.
we could talk about
They hold
fries for a
ketchup.
long time, but I actually have a lunch
Ben has
appointment.
an appointment. Yeah,
So
yeah.
give us your final piece of advice for a prospective student.
Oh man, I got this ready because I do this all the time for your this office.
Exactly.
I always give 3 pieces of advice.
Dang.
Number 1, get your foundation laid. Don't go reading the biggest books you possibly can find. Just actually memorize the Small Catechism, read your Large Catechism, figure out what the basics are. Get that solidified.
Great advice.
Number 2, get your devotional life in order. I mean, they'll say it here. If you're not reading the Bible as a undergraduate, as a worker, as anyone, coming to the seminary is not going to make you start. You're not going to get here on your first day and just go, wow, magically God put this will to read the Bible. No, you have to start that now. So get your foundation laid, and devotional life is part of that. Start praying, start reading. And then the most important part is always just prayer. You have to be in conversation with God. You have to be in conversation with his saints, with your pastor, with you guys in the office. It's not just you alone. This is never just an interaction between you and God. This is an interaction between you and God, you and the church, you and the other saints, you and all these people who God is living in. So that's my piece of advice. Foundation, devotion, prayer. Get that all knocked out.
So good.
Love it. Well, Jake, it's always great to see you. Great to hang out. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your historical wisdom and sharing your good taste in
I feel like I have to put
food.
a caveat that if I've made any mistakes, I'm just a graduate student. I'm not. Not a
You're
big
doing
deal.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
good
was great.
stuff.
Fantastic.
Again, thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom and sharing a little bit of your life with us. Thank you all for listening. And if you find yourself listening and you're one of these people who might be considering church work and you don't know exactly where you fit, along with getting your devotional life together, make sure that you fill out a request for information so that we know who you are, where you are, and how to contact you, so we can begin having conversations with you and help you through that discernment process, because you not only have your brothers and sisters in Christ where you are in the place that you are, but you have brothers and sisters in Christ here at the seminary who are willing to have conversations with you, talk you through it, take you on a tour and show you around our beautiful campus. And if you're not, church work isn't for you, but you're in your home congregation, you've been looking around, there's a young man who you think might be a great pastor, a young woman who might be a great deaconess someday, make sure you tell them, because you could be that person that is that personal nudge, that extra influence that gets them to pursue God's calling for them and help them get here and eventually serve in the church out in the world. Again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you all next time under the fig tree. Take care.